The Vanishing Bridge. In a remote region of Sweden there was a legend about a bridge that must never be crossed. Those who stepped onto it were said to never return, and if they did, they were no longer themselves. Kenji was a traveler exploring the Nordic landscapes. He had rented a car, driving through forests and lakes, capturing photos along the way. That day he was searching for scenic spots when he noticed something unusual. A bridge? It's not on the map. A small wooden bridge stretched over a mist-covered lake. The bridge was old, its wooden planks worn, and rusted signs stood at both ends. On the sign, faded words were barely visible. "Do not cross." Kenji chuckled. "It's just an old bridge, right?" Curious, he parked his car and walked toward it. The lake was still, eerily silent, without a single ripple. But on the far side of the bridge, the mist thickened into an impenetrable wall. Might as well take a look. He lifted his camera and stepped onto the bridge. As he walked, he noticed something strange. His footsteps made no sound. The wooden planks should have creaked beneath his weight, but his steps were silent. Weird. He turned back. The entrance to the bridge was fading into the mist. It was as if the way back was vanishing. I should turn around. A sense of unease crept over him. He spun on his heel and froze. The bridge had grown longer. What the hell? And the bridge, which had been no more than 10 meters long, now stretched endlessly. The shore was gone, swallowed by the fog, as if, the more he walked, the more the bridge extended. This isn't real. He ran, but no matter how far he went, the bridge never ended. Instead, it kept leading him deeper into the mist. Then, someone stood at the end of the bridge. A silhouette emerged from the fog. "Who's there?" He tried to call out, but his throat tightened. The figure was wearing the exact same clothes as Kenji. The shadow slowly lifted a hand. It moved, just slightly behind Kenji's own movements, like a delayed reflection. What the hell is this? A cold chill ran down his spine. The figure took a step forward. Kenji instinctively took a step back, and then the figure stepped back too. The silence deepened. Kenji's heartbeat pounded in his ears. And then the figure's face twisted, slowly, as if it were smiling. Kenji screamed and ran. The fog swirled, his vision blurred into white. And then he collapsed onto the lakeshore. The sun had risen, and the fog had vanished. Kenji gasped for air and turned back toward the bridge. But there was nothing. The bridge had never existed. It was as if it had never been there at all. With shaking hands, he checked his camera, but there were no photos of the bridge. Instead, the last picture taken was a shot of Kenji's own back, a picture he had never taken. The footsteps in the forest. Deep in the forests of Canada, there was a legend about a path where one must never turn around. Those who walked it would always hear footsteps behind them, but no matter what, they must never look back, because those who did never returned. Takuya was a seasoned hiker exploring Canada's vast wilderness. He enjoyed discovering lesser-known trails, places untouched by crowds. That day, he found a narrow, unmarked path. This looks interesting. The path was overgrown, shrouded by thick trees, making it dark even in the daytime. Yet, the fallen leaves suggested that someone had walked there recently. Cautiously, he stepped forward. But, minutes later, he noticed something strange. Footsteps. Crunch, crunch. The sound came from behind him. At first he thought it was an echo of his own steps. But then, the footsteps continued, even after he stopped walking. Is someone there? He turned his head slightly, but his instincts screamed not to look. He wasn't alone, but he couldn't see anyone. And yet... Crunch, crunch. The footsteps were getting closer. The wind had stopped. The birds had gone silent. The world around him was completely still, except for the footsteps circling him. He could feel it. Something was right next to him, but there was no shadow. Stay still. Don't turn around. His heart pounded as he shut his eyes. Then, a whisper brushed against his ear. Why won't you look at me? Takuya bolted. He ran, faster than he ever had before, and the footsteps, they ran with him. As long as he didn't turn back, he would be fine. But then, the path split into two, left or right. Which one led to safety? He hesitated, and in that moment, a cold hand touched his shoulder. The next thing he knew, he was on the ground. Opening his eyes, he found himself back at the entrance of the forest. I made it. The morning sun filtered through the trees, the world peaceful again. But something was wrong. He looked down. There were no footprints, not a single mark in the dirt where he had walked, as if he had never been there at all. Since that day, Takuya never paid attention to footsteps in the forest again, because he could still feel someone walking behind him.
Like, if you're still here.
The Shadowed Inn. In a remote village in Romania, there was a small inn. It was an old stone building, said to have welcomed travelers for centuries. Erica, a solo traveler, stumbled upon it while passing through the countryside. This place has a nice atmosphere. The inn was situated away from the town center, surrounded by silence. A weathered sign hung above the door, reading, Casa Umbrelor, the House of Shadows. Without hesitation, Erica pushed open the door. Inside, the inn was surprisingly warm and inviting. Soft lantern light flickered against the stone walls, and at the reception desk stood a tall man. "Welcome," he greeted her with a calm smile. There was nothing unusual about him, yet something about his presence felt slightly off. "I'd like a room for the night." "Of course, but..." He paused, still smiling. "At night, please pay no attention to the shadows in your room." "Shadows?" "Yes. Sometimes they move in strange ways, but this is an old building. It's nothing to worry about. Just rest well." With the key in hand, Erica made her way upstairs to her room. It was simple. A bed, a wooden desk, and a single window overlooking the quiet street. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Tired from her travels, she took a quick shower and collapsed onto the bed. Outside, the moonlight shone down, casting long shadows against the walls. Then, she noticed it. Something was wrong with her shadow. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe the lantern's flickering was making it move strangely. But no, it was delayed. She raised her left hand. Her shadow followed, as it should have, but just a fraction of a second too late. And its fingers moved slightly differently. No. A strange unease crept over her. Then she remembered the innkeeper's words. "Pay no attention to the shadows." Easier said than done. The shadow swayed slightly, as if something inside it was alive. Erica exhaled sharply and got up. If she wasn't supposed to notice the shadows, she could just turn off the light. She reached for the lantern switch. Darkness filled the room. And then, creak, a soft, deliberate footstep. Her breath caught in her throat. She was alone, but something was moving in the dark. "Is someone there?" Silence. Yet, she could feel something shifting. Quickly, she turned the lantern back on. Light flooded the room, and on the wall, her shadow was facing her. A scream tore from her lips as she ran for the door. She pulled at the handle. It wouldn't open. "Let me out!" She pounded on the wood, but no one came. Behind her, the shadow moved closer. It wasn't lagging anymore. Now, it was moving first. Her body was simply following. The next thing Erica knew, she was standing outside the inn. The sun had risen. Everything was quiet. She turned back toward the door. The wooden sign still hung above it, but the name had vanished. The letters were gone, as if they had never been there at all. She looked down. Her shadow stretched along the ground. It moved exactly as she did, except for one thing. It was smiling.